has courage deserted the noble houses of Westeros, and there no true knight among you!
If you like Lord of the Rings more than Game of Thrones, that is a self-report that you're a LARPer.
Filthy, casual, show-only, book burner fans who refuse to read any of the Game of Thrones novels, let alone novellas like Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. My goodness.
Welcome to the end of democracy. We're here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this
you
right
like
here.
Gay little hobbits? Gay little hobbits and the magic of friendship? I like people getting their heads chopped off.
Give me something for the pain, and let me die.
You were a conscientious objector.
I was, yes, during Vietnam.
What was that?
I wanted to tell a story that focused to some extent on the small folk, as I call them, on the people who were not lords. They were not contending. They weren't going to get the Iron Throne unless everybody else in Westeros died. Civil wars and the magic and the threat of the others or the White Walkers in the north, all of that. How does that affect the ordinary people?
I was not a complete pacifist. You know, the big question they would always ask you is, would you have fought in World War II against the Nazis? Well, yes, I would have fought in World War II against the Nazis. But the Viet Cong were not the Nazis, and I didn't think America had any business in Vietnam and so forth. None of which is meant to excuse Donald Trump, who is both an appalling human being and a terrible president. Well, I don't like to close out the possibility of redemption to anyone, but in the case of Trump, I think it's unlikely. I see no evidence that this man actually has a conscience.
Fantasy is a genre with limitless potential. Worlds never before conceived, sometimes unconstrained by the laws of physics. As a medium for storytelling, when it is at its best, there is truly nothing else like it.
Squadala, we are off to prison.
Fantasy is also beloved by some of the worst and most hateful people on the planet.
I know you're a big Game of Thrones fan.
The politics is the stuff that I liked about the show. The magic was much less interesting to me.
Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, will personally open a new exhibition about the Lord of the Rings author J.R.R. Tolkien at Rome's National Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art on Wednesday.
This may be obvious, but why did you name it Palantir after the seeing stones in the Lord of the Rings?
Yes. For those of you who had a social life in high school, you may not realize what Palantir is. For those of us who didn't have a social life, you immediately jumps out at you as the seeing stones in Lord of the Rings. And they allowed the West to communicate, or the forces of good to communicate and see into vast distances.
Anachronistic and pseudo-medievalist settings are like catnip to the kind of people who imagine a glorious past, perfect and free of all of the things that they don't like, usually people like me, people of other races, and their mums telling them to go to bed early. These people, more often than not, miss the actual themes of the works they applaud, however. When they watch, for example, Freerun Beyond Journey's End, they do not see a story about treasuring the people you love while you still can, and leaving a better world behind for future generations. They see, instead, other races are inherently evil and must be destroyed. When these reactionary fans look at a work such as George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, and its TV adaptations such as Game of Thrones, they miss the critique of hierarchy and power, despite how incredibly on the nose the Season 8 finale made this. They miss the extremely obvious feminist messaging of characters like Brienne and Sam, who are defined by their defiance of gender roles forced on them by the society they grow up in.
Brienne the Beauty, they called me. Great joke.
Your father taught you to hunt. Our father would never teach us.
Bad enough already.
When they see A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, they see, well...
Hey, here's this Game of Thrones blogger, and now he's in the White House. Like, how did that happen?
On the 16th of February, 2026, following the release of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Episode 5, In the Name of the Mother, while most of us were reeling from the death of Baelor Breakspear, the king who never was.
I am your man. Please. Your man.
Famous white supremacist Jack End Wokeness Posobiec posted a 30-second clip from the show with the words, "This is white culture." Is it though?
It's so monocultural because it's mostly been written by white men, and we look back on our own history and the cultures and things we were taught, raised up on legends of Robin Hood and King Arthur, and Tolkien was an expert on Beowulf and all that, and that's true of many of the Tolkien imitators. Even the people writing it today are all drawn from the same cultural pool. However, I do see evidence that that's changing.
Hello, I'm Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, the only newspaper in Britain delivered exclusively via Raven. Today, I'm here to talk about one of my favourite stories of all time, and how conservatives, particularly one prominent conservative, are completely and utterly misunderstanding it and twisting it in knots to justify their far-right agenda.
The politics is the stuff that I liked about the show. The magic was much less interesting to me.
Game of Thrones was poorly understood by many people on the political right. Ben Shapiro was a massive fan, and even did a little musical tribute to the show, despite the themes of A Song of Ice and Fire, and George R. R. Martin's work as a whole not exactly being on the level with his politics. Ditto Charlie Kirk, who is apparently obsessed with the show, and not long before he got Ned Starked, apparently texted Candace Owens about Ben Shapiro apparently trying to sabotage his own careers, saying, "He knows Jon Snow is stronger as the dragons fly higher." And with all due respect to a man who can no longer explain himself, what the actual fuck does that even mean? At least when he followed up with, "And he is sending his incestuous brother to go try and kill us." It's a coherent sentence. Outside of those two idiots, we have an actual neo-Nazi, Nick Fuentes, who, in an argument with his chat, complained that he hates Lord of the Rings because it's gay, and instead loves Game of Thrones because bad things happen for no reason.
I want to watch a movie about powerful people killing everyone. You know what I mean? Do you get me? My favorite genre of movie is like, there's a white male and he's the best at what he does and he's able to get out of any situation. That's why I like Game of Thrones, because it's just people getting their heads cut off all the time. It's just brutal. People just getting killed all the time, and people getting stabbed and heads blown off, and Lord of the Rings is gay, Game of Thrones is based, Ned Stark would kick the Hobbits' fucking ass, Jon Snow would beat the Hobbits to death like it's not even a contest. You like gay little hobbits? Gay little hobbits and the magic of friendship? I like people getting their heads chopped off for no reason, because that's life. And that's life. A sword swinging around, chopping everybody's heads off at random. And you like the power of friendship and magic rings and little elves and the power of their friendship and big gay wizards.
And this is a view I've seen expressed by a lot of people, which is odd because it's entirely wrong. Bad things don't just happen out of nowhere in George R. R. Martin's work. Actions have consequences. When a character dies, you can almost always see how their actions led them to that end. Granted, it does stand out against other works, and even the TV show Game of Thrones, which gave almost everyone plot armor the moment they deviated from the source material, and it's rare that a story insists that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean you get the outcome you hope for. But importantly, and I think this is especially important when talking about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, you should do it anyway.
How much do you want for the new rim and all? From you, a cuppa.
You can see existentialist themes all over George R. R. Martin's work. Existentialism being, to paraphrase in a way that risks being super reductive and possibly pissing off every philosophy major watching, the philosophy of finding meaning and purpose in a world that is cruel, absurd, and does not necessarily reward people for doing what is right. From George R. R. Martin's first novel, Dying of the Light, to the series he is most known for, the protagonists of Martin's stories are often faced with a harsh and cruel world, and struggle with finding purpose and a sense of morality despite it. This is a theme A Song of Ice and Fire has in common with Berserk, a manga set in an almost absurdly cruel fantasy world, and whose main character is consistently faced with trauma, pain, betrayal, and some of the worst things any person could hope to face. And because this is a fantasy world with demons and dark gods, much worse. But the story is not about how horrible the world is. It's about how our protagonist, Guts, finds purpose, meaning, and even love in the form of his companions and those he cares for, and keeps moving forward, despite the world constantly trying, and sometimes succeeding, to break him. When Ned Stark is executed at the end of Game of Thrones, it's not because, ooh, random, how weird, how edgy, no. It's because his rigid sense of honour led him to confront Cersei and tell her that he knew what she had done.
When the king returns from his hunt, I'll tell him the truth. You must be gone by then.
Dunk, the main character of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, like Guts, grew up in poverty, and, especially with the additional flashbacks we get in the show, we see that his life was brutal, that violence was common, and that he had to steal to survive. And part of what makes Dunk the person that he is that despite seeing firsthand how cruel and twisted the world can be, how horribly the small folk and the commoners of Flea Bottom are treated, and notably how no knights lived up to the image of the hero they were supposed to embody, chooses to be that embodiment of the ideal of knighthood, to become someone who protects those who can't protect themselves, somebody who stands up for what is right. And in doing this, in playing this role, he brings out the best in the people around him, even winning the Crown Prince over to his side.
This man protected the innocent, as every true knight must have. Let the gods decide if he was right or wrong.
But these right-wingers don't have any interest in actually analysing the story for what it is. They want to make it an advert for their ideology. And I can hear you saying, British Empire, you godless transsexual leftoid, you're going to do the same in this video. And I promise you, I'm not going to try to, but, you know, it would be easier for me to do so, because George R. R. Martin's politics are much closer to mine than they are to Jack Posobiec. Do I have to read you one of the most famous lines from the books to illustrate my point? The High Septon once told me that as we sin, so do we suffer. If that's true, Lord Eddard, tell me, why is it always the innocents who suffer most when you High Lords play your Game of Thrones? And so we return to Jack Posobiec, and this tweet claiming that the trial of the Seven from A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is white culture. And, with all due respect to a man I do not at all respect, that's genuinely bananas. And it was made even more bananas with this follow-up tweet. Prince Baelor is white, you filthy casual. All Targaryens are white. The whole series is based on medieval Europe. All of it is white culture. Imagine being a illiterate, show-only gay race, communist failed comedian. That insult wasn't meant for me, by the way, and you can tell that it's not, because I'm one of those book purists that everyone who liked the last 4 seasons of Game of Thrones complains about. But I'll take the rest, if it wasn't for the delicious irony of accusing people of being illiterate while misspelling the word Anne.
Ironic.
But is Jack right here? Is the character in question white? Are all Targaryens white? Well, the character we're looking at is Baelor Breakspear, who is supposed to look like his Dornish mother. Dorne being a region that, depending on the day you ask him, George R. R. Martin has likened to Palestine and Moorish Spain with some Wales mixed in. Arguably not white, although you could make the case. There are some types of Dornish that look more white. The show did cast a white actor though, so I could understand if we didn't get that nuance in the show. But whiteness also, as we know it, does not exist in the Game of Thrones universe. Race is a social construct, and while yes, people obviously have different skin tones, that doesn't necessarily mean that they get classified as distinct race categories. In fact, on Earth, we only really started doing that with the advent of the slave trade as a way to justify treating millions of people as if they weren't, you know, people. Westeros does not have chattel slavery, as far as we know. It does not have white culture. There are Andals, there are Thirstmen, Rhoynar, Dornishmen, Bravosi, Dothraki, and Valyrians, but these aren't divided by skin colour. In fact, one of the few groups in Westeros that is distinguished by their appearance and is seen as arguably a race unto itself are the Valyrians, and specifically the Targaryens that Jack insists are all white. George R.R. Martin doesn't seem to agree with Jack's sentiment at all, however.
Right from the start, I want the Targaryens, and by extension the Valyrians, from whom they were descended, to be a race apart, with distinctive features that set them apart from the rest of Westeros, and help explain their obsession with the purity of their blood. To do this, I made a conventional high fantasy choice, and gave them silver gold hair, purple and violet eyes, fine chiseled aristocratic features. That worked well enough, at least in the books, on the show less so. But in recent years, it has occurred to me from time to time that it might have made for an interesting twist if instead I had made the Dragon Lords of Valyria, and therefore the Targaryens, black. Maybe I could have kept the silver hair too, though no, that comes too close to Dark Elf territory, but still. If I'd had dark-skinned Dragon Lords invade and conquer and dominate a largely white Westeros, though that choice would have brought its own perils, the Targaryens have not all been heroic, after all. Some of them have been monsters, madmen, so, well, it's all moot. The idea came to me about 20 years too late.
And this is another point Jack Posobiec has completely missed. The Targaryens, Aerion and a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms for example, sometimes display a very worrying concern for blood purity. They distinguish themselves from the people they rule, after all, partially thanks to their distinct appearance. Jack Posobiec wants us to think that this show is a celebration of white culture, but the people he thinks are all white are 1, not really, and 2, sometimes, in the case of the villain of this show, Aerion, partially white supremacist coded as well. The thing is, when you get as deep into the far-right rabbit hole as Jack Posobiec, you start to see everything through the lens of your bloodthirsty obsession. To paraphrase badly BoJack Horseman, when you look at something through National Socialist glasses, every person looks like a Hitler. Or something. But even all that aside, this trial, and Baelor's triumphant arrival on the side of our hero in this trial, was sparked by a prince who believes he is superior due to both his royalty and his ancestry, which you could, if you wanted, call an analogy to white supremacy, attacking and breaking the fingers of a Dornish common woman, played in the show by Tamsin Crawford, a black woman, who George R.R. Martin reportedly told looked exactly as he pictured, by the way. The story, reduced to its most basic elements, is about a common-born man doing the right thing even if it means his death, going up against the monarchy and the norms of the society he lives in. He literally punches the very symbol of the rich and powerful in the face to save a woman of colour.
Why did you throw your life away for this whore? She's scarcely worth it.
Our hero believes in upholding the ideals of what a knight is supposed to be. Our villain represents the reality of what knights do. Our hero has no power. The villain is literally a prince. And yet, our hero does the right thing anyway. What is white culture about this? Is it the cruel and callous prince abusing the weak because he's such a snowflake that a play about a knight slaying a dragon offends him?
The Dragon Lord never lose.
Is it the incest?
Targaryens wed brothers and sisters for 300 years to keep bloodlines pure.
Is it the idea of standing up to power, even when it is hard, and might make no difference at all because it is right?
And there no true knight among you!
Given who Jack Posobiec is, I really doubt it's that last part. And given who George R.R. Martin is, and what he believes, I really think he would take issue with his work being described as white culture. And it's not as if you can't, and probably more accurately could, read this show as advocating for defending women and minorities from oppressive ruling class white people, but it's not as if Jack Posobiec is the only weird right-wing asshole trying to claim one of the greatest fantasy stories of all time as one of their own, despite the author being alive and being, to put it mildly, not an advocate of their politics. Just look at these idiots. No DEI casting. Honourable white man in the lead role. Clearly defined good versus evil characters. No subversive morally grey characters. Strong men who defend the innocent. They killed it with this show. Aside from the random blacks in the background for no fucking reason, it's been fairly enjoyable. There's plenty of DEI casting, but in comparison to recent humiliations, it's much less offensive.
The everybody pretends this lady is desirable DEI.
Non-woke Game of Thrones spin-off explodes in popularity.
Are you having a hard time finding something interesting to watch these days? I highly recommend A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. No DEI, no woke shit, no feminine man, just cinema. Are there no true knights among you? Did you know that one of the biggest Game of Thrones fan accounts of all time was run not by your average neckbeard, or the women they transitioned into during the later seasons of Game of Thrones, and not by anyone that understood the source material and the point of view of its author, but by white supremacist, OANN and Turning Point USA correspondent, Trump loyalist, and the man who both runs the End Wokeness Twitter account and received that phony binder of the Epstein files in that infamous photo shoot, Jack Posobiec.
Welcome to the end of democracy. We're here to overthrow it completely. We didn't get all the way there on January 6th, but we will endeavor to get rid of it and replace it with this right here. We'll replace it with this right here.
Amen.
That's right. He's not just a random Twitter idiot. He should know better than anyone how wrong he is. Starting from 2012, Jack Posobiec ran a blog, podcast, and social media account known only as Angry Game of Thrones Fan.
Yeah, so people, obviously people know me more for like politics and Trump stuff and all that. But prior to my political whatever media work and activism and Turning Point and everything else, I was online and ran a blog and my original Twitter account was called, I was the Angry GOT Fan. And as Angry GOT Fan, it started off when I was still in the military, still in the intel community, and was posting anonymously. So, former Anon here, recovering Anon, and was always tweeting from the perspective of a guy who was a book fan who was not a fan of the show. We didn't have the word woke yet, that had yet to enter the lexicon, but you would, so we used to say social justice warrior, and we used to say things like this. And so I was never part of Gamergate or anything like that, but this was sort of my entree to this whole world, was through criticizing what I saw was the rise of social justice or wokeness in HBO. And then, of course,
according to Posobiec himself, the website was supposed to be to Game of Thrones what Red Letter Media's Plinkett reviews were to Star Wars. Which is interesting, because as you can tell from who Jack Posobiec is, he didn't seem to internalize the themes of George R.R. Martin's work at all. In fact, in what was probably an intentional slap in the face to famous conscientious objector and old-school feminist George R.R. Martin, in 2015, Posobiec wrote a Donald Trump and Sansa Stark slashfic called The Lady and the Trump. The Lady and the Trump, by Jack Posobiec. The first time Donald Trump locked eyes with her, he built a tower straight to Sansa's heart. Sansa knew he had won her faster than he had won the support of the Night's Watch due to their similar views on immigration. Named Lady of Winterfell and Warden of the North after King Stannis won the Iron Throne, Sansa's next duty was to find a suitable husband. She needed someone strong, someone with the resources and know-how to rebuild the war-torn North. The Donald was all of these things and more. The way he held himself as a true lord, the way he spoke with the confidence of a great leader, the way his hair fell onto his forehead and neck and ears, and kind of on one shoulder but not the other. Yes, he is the one for me, thought Sansa. Still, she could not give away her affection too easily. Many others had come calling to woo her hand in marriage in the years since Sansa had ordered the quartering of Daenerys. Ravens had flown from as far away as Prince Trystane in Sunspear, and many had arrived from Lord Theon on Pike. She had instructed Maester Samwell to respond with only vague courtesy. They were ardent caller, but not right for the First Lady Stark of Winterfell in her own right. A hasty marriage to the Donald, however, and rumour and folly would spread throughout the lands, and the spectre of another war would rise. Sansa glanced back from the window well at the Donald, who was sitting backwards on one of the wooden chairs in the great hall.
Listen, Sansa, I know this is a big decision for you, but let me tell you something. We will be phenomenal. I will cherish you as much as I cherished my first 2 wives, and my own mother, and my daughter even. I have many women that work for me. I am gonna do great things for women. Great things. Very, very, very good things. Fuck's sake. I hate this so much.
A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a TV show based on the Tales of Duncan Egg novellas by George R.R. Martin, and named after the book that collects the 3 published Duncan Egg novellas with beautiful illustrations by Gary Gianni, as seen here, modelled by Sabahai of the Bed. The first season of the TV show closely adapts the first novella, The Hedge Knight, which takes place 89 years or so before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire, the main book series more widely known for being butchered in the HBO show Game of Thrones. The novella and the show follows Dunk, or as he will be known, Sir Duncan the Tall, following the death of his mentor and father figure, Sir Arlen of Pennytree.
I don't know the right words. You're a true knight.
Dunk briefly considers what to do with his life without Sir Arlen, before deciding to try his hand at being a knight, with Sir Arlen's weapons, armour, and horses.
Then what? That road ends in outlawry or beggary.
If I'd sold Thunder and Old Chestnut, and the saddles and bridles too, I could come away with enough silver to... I could find another Hedge Knight in need of a squire to tend his animals and clean his mail, or might be I could go to some city, to Lannisport, or King's Landing and join the city watch, or else... His sword fits my grip as well as it ever fit his, and there's a tourney at Ashford Meadow. For a lowborn man, a poor man, it is a risk, but it is probably the one chance he'll ever have to break free of the shackles the feudal order of Westeros has placed upon him. One big stain upon his character, one big lie, one that will define his life. From this point, this one moment, Dunk will go from a poor squire whose knight died before he could ever be knighted himself, from a false knight to the only true knight in a world of men who got the title through the proper channels and yet failed to uphold its ideals and its obligations and its duties to the gods to protect the weak and the innocent. Sir Duncan the Tall is a true knight, in part because he is no knight at all.
Why did you never knight me? Did you think I'd leave you?
Dunk the Lunk. He thought he could be a knight. I failed him. I am no champion. I'm not even a hedge knight. I am nothing. And this is really important to hammer home, because so much of this story is about what it means to be a knight, both in reality and in the sense of upholding the ideal of a knight. The kind of knight that people tell stories about, that Sansa dreams of in A Game of Thrones. And it's the contrast between the idea of the knight, someone that protects the weak and the innocent in the name of the mother, and the reality of knights, as nobles motivated by personal glory and petty grievances and ego, with at best indifference and often contempt for the very people they are supposedly dedicated to protecting and serving. You can probably see a metaphor starting to show its face here, and you should notice it because it's certainly important. You could definitely do a reading of this story as a criticism of the police, and probably more intentionally, the military, where a section of the population is lifted up to a position of societal deference and advertised to the common folk as being there to serve and protect the citizenry, to prevent crime and harm, to protect and defend the people of the country, when in reality, the very structure of the order incentivizes violence against the very weak and innocent they are on paper supposed to be protecting. In fact, it's very hard to see George R.R. Martin's writing without considering that particular angle, or at least adjacent angles. Martin is, after all, pretty vocally left-wing, and his politics are rooted in old-school feminism and the anti-Vietnam War movement. which is what makes this attempt by the most deranged far-right grifters in the States to embrace him all the more bizarre. Criticisms of power and war are central to the series. If there were, hypothetically, a war-hungry, violent abuser of power in charge of the country George R. R. Martin lived in, it would be an insult to the writer and his work to act like he was some sort of harmless caricature or even a hero, right?
None of which is meant to excuse Donald Trump, who is both an appalling human being and a terrible president.
Sansa replied, "That you may, but what will you do for the North?"
For North? Look, and now what I mean is, I will be a huge game changer for the North. Huge. I mean, I am very, very, very smart, and I have a lot of respect for the Northerners. I've put a lot of blood of the first men to work in my castles and keeps, and let me tell you, they absolutely, demonstrably love me. They love me. My whole body is ready for this. I'm not just saying this, Sansa Stark. I'm gonna do it.
He smiled and put on his big red hat that said, "Make Westeros great again." "But what of the threats from the east?" Sansa implored. She was growing impatient at this Pentoshi landmonger's boisterousness, and needed definite answers. She wanted to marry him so much, her heart was about to jump out of her chest like Mola Ram in Temple of Doom. Wait, the Temple of Doom exists in this universe? Anyway, they were both beautiful. They were both gingers. It made so much sense. Even still, she put the needs of her people above her own desires, unlike the idiot Daenerys, who is now quartered.
Threats from the east. They're killers. They're killers, they are, and I'm glad you bring it up, because China, 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 Chinny Chinny, Chin Chin Chiru. As you can probably tell from this incredibly in poor taste fanfiction, Jack Posobiec, despite his long-running admiration for Martin and The Song of Ice and Fire, allegedly, is not very good at grasping the substance of writing. His analysis of his favourite media seems to mostly be, there are white people in this, therefore it is white supremacist and that is good, actually. And besides that, just fundamentally misunderstanding even the most basic themes of the text and the facts of the characters that drive it. For example, remember how I was just talking about the importance of the fact that Dunk is not actually a knight to the story? That Dunk is able to uphold the ideals of protecting the weak and the innocent precisely because he isn't a knight and wasn't part of the corrupt and violent culture of the highborn knights around him? Well, Jack Posobiec doesn't understand this at all, and instead thinks that there is no deeper meaning to the show at all, and, well, let's just quote this idiot again. "Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is good, because it actually shows that a knight can be a hero and morally good. Been years since any show had a character like this. Literally just an hour of white dudes fighting with armor on in the name of defending a woman's honor." Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that this reading of the show, and especially the novella, is absolutely unhinged. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is not, in fact, a show about how a knight can be a hero and morally good. In fact, Jack Posobiec has gotten this entirely backwards. The knights in this show are, for the most part, arrogant, selfish, and only out for themselves, with a couple of exceptions, with no regard for the common people or anything but their own personal ambitions and glory. Dunk throws a spanner in the works with his presence. Without Dunk, who stands up for Tansel when she is attacked by a prince? Dunk is a hero. He is also not a knight, but in living up to the idea of what a knight should be, he becomes a truer knight than any knight who has made one the right way. This is so core to this story, I really can't believe that anyone would say this shit. Granted, this was before the last 2 episodes of the show made the fact that Dunk is not a knight less and less ambiguous, but given how deep in the fandom this man was, you would think he would have been able to catch the times Dunk over and over again thinks about how he's not a knight. Dunk looked at him thoughtfully. He knew what it was like to want something so badly, you would tell a monstrous lie just to get near it. "I thought you were like me," he said. "Might be you are, only not in the way that I thought." And then in the show,
There's the discussion with Lionel Baratheon about how he's a fraud, the moment where Raymond Fossoway asked to be knighted by him, and he clearly doesn't know the words to the ceremony. And let's talk about Raymond Fossoway as well. Not a knight, before he decides to fight for Dunk's cause, becoming a true knight. Like Dunk, he is made a knight by his decision to aid his friend in defending the innocent, in contrast to all of the other knights in the tourney.
Seek your champions, Sir Duncan.
Dunk's story directly parallels that of Brienne of Tarth in the main series too, someone who is heavily implied to be descended from Dunk. Fun fact. Like Dunk, Brienne is not a knight, because she is a woman, and yet she, more than any knight in the series, acts as fairy tale knights are supposed to do. She is righteous, she wishes to protect the innocent, she has honour, her presence helped to make Jaime Lannister a better person, and Brienne's arc in the books has her seeing firsthand the horrors that the wars of the early books have had on the small folk. Shout out A Feast for Crows. Brienne is probably the person that most embodies the idea of what a knight should be in her generation, as is Dunk in his, and neither of them were ever knighted. It's almost as if George R.R. Martin is trying to tell us something.
Oh, yes, I would have fought in World War II against the Nazis, but the Viet Cong were not the Nazis, and I didn't think America had any business in Vietnam, and so forth.
Just as in Game of Thrones, Sansa's idea of a fairy tale knight in shining armor is shattered by a world of violent, cruel, and selfish knights. Knights in the real world were not the heroes we know from fairy tales. Knights as a warrior class were, after all, men of violence, often seeking personal glory above all else. After all, their job was first and foremost to fight for their lords and kings, and part of the custom of chivalry was the idea of personal prestige. And while you might be familiar with codes of chivalry that commanded knights to protect the weak and innocent, these were arguably a late invention, creating an ideal image of a knight to venerate. Following the Crusades, in which, if you're familiar with the Crusades, knights did not at all act like the kind of knights you read about in fairy tales, to put it lightly. To quote briefly from Chivalry and Violence in Late Medieval Castile by Samuel Clausen, "From a political perspective, knights sought to guard their personal prerogatives and wield political power in the kingdom. Always claiming to be loyal servants of the king, they were nonetheless prepared at a moment's notice to go to war with the king or the king's supporters to protect their political privileges. From a social perspective, knights defined themselves through their honour and their lineage. Peasants and commoners who did not have honour or lineage to the same degree that knights claimed had no right to violence as far as knights were concerned. As the exclusive owners of violent action, knights felt free to exercise their violence on those below them in the social hierarchy. This is not to say that there were no true knights among the people of the past, but that this idea of knights good that Posobiec seems to think is the message of the story is completely backwards. Dunk is a hero because he cares about the people of Westeros. He is one of them. Most of the other knights consider themselves better than the common people and do not consider them worth protecting. Brienne understands this too, from her experiences being shunned as a woman, and particularly as an ugly woman and a warrior. And this is a common form of hero for George R.R. Martin, as he would put it in A Game of Thrones, cripples, bastards, and broken things. But Dunk is more than that. He is a man of the people. This is seen in the show through his relationship with Steely Pate the Smith and Rowan the sex worker, whose arc parallels Dunk to an extent. And I do like how they emphasize the similarity between their two jobs, both selling their bodies to the nobility for a tiny chance at a better life.
I'm not troubled with the wealth of options, am I? And if I mean to take service in a castle...
It must put its body at hazard for the pleasure of strangers. Ain't that our job?
But this aspect of Dunk is much more in your face in the novella. In the novella, we see much more emphasis on Dunk's poverty. He is constantly counting coins, worrying about what he can spend, whereas in the show he is buying egg drinks and extra food, and in the novella we see very directly how Dunk has the common people beside him. And this is something that Jack Posobiec would, I would imagine, hate if he had enough media literacy to work out what this means, and wasn't instead busy writing, "Yes, that's an issue as well. Sansa broke in. But I also mean the rising chaos in the Slavers' Bay. When the Misa abandoned the cities she had conquered, the former slaves rose up in a bloody orgy of brutality and violence and installed one of their own, a new emperor, Jewish like Haiti." Okay, Haiti now exists, I guess. "Now their vengefulness is spreading across the continent, and they have brokered a treaty with the Dothraki."
Those whiners, those slave losers, they're losers, what a bunch of goofballs. And to be honest, I'm gonna be honest with you, Sansa, they're boring. Daenerys, she did an absolutely horrible job. She should be ashamed of herself if she were still alive. And she was an extremely unattractive woman, but I wouldn't say that because I'm always politically correct. Now I will crush them, just crush them. There's so much going on with these buffoons here in the realm. So much, you know, Jaime Lannister apologized to me the other day. He did, but I will not accept his apology. I will be suing him for a lot of money. What an irrelevant clown. He thinks he could be Lord Commander when he doesn't even have a hand. Look at him. He sweats and shakes nervously as he talks about me, has zero cred. Zero. And I hear that Sleepy Eyes Davos will be fired like a dog. I can't imagine what's taking so long. That Stannis did really poorly on television this morning. I hope he's okay, I do, because I love him and he's a good guy, but he needs a new pair of glasses.
At that moment, Sansa knew. She walked over to the Donald and stared at him deeply until he stopped ranting and looked down at her. He's so fragile, so vulnerable, she thought. He stepped back and brought up his hand, putting it into his trademark thumb and forefinger to deliver to her the snap words so many had heard before. But just before he could, she grabbed his hand and laced her thin fingers in with his. Staring into his eyes, she said, "You're hired." In the Hedge Knight novella, when Dunk is talking with the blacksmith Steely Pate in fear for his life, after going against the feudal hierarchy that kept him and other small folk down his entire life by kicking a literal prince's teeth in because it was the right thing to do, he, as in the show, is shown kindness by the smith. Unlike the show, however, in the novella, after this tearjerker of a moment, something beautiful happens. Steely Pate walked with him. The viewing stand had already begun to fill, the lords and ladies clutching their cloaks tight about them against the morning chill. Small folk were drifting towards the field as well, and hundreds of them already stood along the fence. So many come to see me die, thought Dunk bitterly. But he wronged them. A few steps farther on, a woman called out, "Good fortune to you!" An old man stepped up to take his hand and said, "May the gods give you strength, sir." Then a begging brother in a tattered brown robe said a blessing on his sword, and a maid kissed his cheek. "They are for me." "Why?" he asked Pate. "What am I to them?" "A knight who remembered his vows," the smith said. This is the defining moment of the Hedge Knight. The culmination of the themes and indeed the defining moment for Dunk's character. Showrunner Ira Parker said that leaving it out was a mistake, and I have to believe it was, because this is what makes Dunk and Egg and George R. R. Martin's work in general so special. And let's be honest with ourselves, if Ira Parker didn't agree with that sentiment, he wouldn't have ended this series with 16 Tons, one of the all-time working class anthems. So Duncan the Tall is presented as a working class hero. He's explicitly shown as a parallel to the sex workers in the TV show outside of the feudal hierarchy, locked out of wealth and power, forced to sell the use of his body to the nobility to survive. And this is something that is made explicit in the novella in a different way. In The Hedge Knight, Dunk is constantly thinking about money. He does not have much, and he's very careful where he spends it. For the first time in George's Westeros books, we really get the sense of how it is to live on the margins. And when Dunk is embraced by the people for doing what is right, it is the common folk who offer him encouragement and solidarity, and who rightly see him as a hero, despite the lords parading themselves as if they are the protagonists of fairy tales while doing nothing for the people. Jack Posobiec's interpretation of the story would leave this moment as a footnote, or as a simple, white man knight, hero good, rather than what it so beautifully is. A demonstration of solidarity, the making of a hero by way of his deeds and what he's done for others, rather than right of birth or by the decree of some lord. Dunk gains his legitimacy as a knight in the eyes of the people, through the people. He is the hero that they chose, because he stands up for them. He believes they deserve to be treated as human beings because he is one of them. And because he does not forget that, even when he takes on the role of a knight. Posobiec, meanwhile, well, we know what he thinks about common people being the subject of violence from those in power. No matter what Jack Posobiec might think, he should know that he is not Dunk. He would be the Arion attacking Tanzel for daring to allude to a dragon being killable. Did he and his fellow travelers not celebrate ice when they came for Renee Good and Alex Pretty? Were they not celebrating that their fellow citizens were met with horrible fates because they didn't like Trump and therefore deserved what was coming to them? Did they not celebrate when immigrants were being rounded up in the streets? When George Floyd and Breonna Taylor met their ends at the hands of a militarized force who pretended protecting and serving while doing anything but? I wonder what George R. R. Martin thinks should happen to people who do things like that. Well, let's see how our hero deals with people like that. There's a scene that was added for the show that I think is a perfect addition to this story, and that I think is an incredible way to close off both Dunk's story in Season 1 and this video. In a flashback, at the end of Sir Arlen's life, we watch as Sir Arlen of Pennytree, Dunk's father figure, and the man who would not knight him, tells the story of where his name came from. Where he grew up, when a boy left for war, they would nail a penny to a tree, and when they returned safe, they would take the penny down. Before long, the tree was so thoroughly covered in pennies that it became difficult to find a spot to nail your own penny down. Sir Arlen's name is a reminder of the danger inherent in his profession. A reminder of all the boys that were summoned to die for some lord or another, for a conflict that wasn't their own, and that never came back. It is a story you hear time and time again throughout history, and perhaps, because of the way I was taught, it makes me think of World War I, and the letters from soldiers, gone, still basically children, dragged into fighting for a war they had no say in, and had no good reason to even be happening. For George R. R. Martin, I can only imagine this would be the Vietnam War. Sir Arlen didn't want that for Dunk. He wanted to protect him. And that kindness, that care for a child he didn't have to take in, for another boy outside the system, a boy that came from nothing, helped shape Dunk into the hero he became. By not knighting Dunk, Sir Arlen made Sir Duncan the Tall the truest knight of them all. And this is why Dunk raising egg in the life of a Hedge Knight is so important. His brothers, as Dunk points out, grew up in privilege, taught to see common people as beneath them, taught to believe in their inherent superiority. By raising him among the common people, Egg might be different. He might learn to empathize with the small folk in a way none of his predecessors had, and learn enough to want to make the world a better place for those who suffer most under the cruel feudal system. And he will. But that's a story that is yet to be told. What, did you forget this was a George R. R. Martin series? Of course it's unfinished! The thing is, however, Jack Posobiec, given he was a superfan, knows all this. Or at least he should. It's genuinely impossible to read The Hedge Knight and come away thinking this story is a celebration of white culture. Hell, half the right-wingers I see talking about the story's politics online are complaining about how George R. R. Martin is a liberal. Well, that's not the word they use, but I think you could imagine the one they're actually saying. But George R. R. Martin is an old lefty hippie. He's not the kind of person who Jack Posobiec spent his post-Angry Game of Thrones fan career lifting up. If Jack Posobiec truly wants to end wokeness, well then, he's gonna have to end his favorite book series.
Below 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older, deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Hey, thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, leave a comment, subscribe, give it a hype. Let's hype this train. Train this hype. This one was mainly for me. Sometimes my media ones don't do so well, but I had to. I love this. I love this so much. I'm a massive Martin fan, as you can probably tell from this video. And oh my lord, I'm so hyped. We've never been so back. We are so fucking back. Oh my god. We're back. We're fucking back, boys. Okay. How do I even pivot from that? Tell your friends about this, share it around, and give me money if you can, because yes, lots of expenses this year. So just to get into TMI for a bit, gamete storage payment went out. The yearly bills went out. Tooth money, fixed tooth, so it doesn't fall out, went out. So help me with being able to live. With money, you can give me one-time donations on Coffee or PayPal, links below as always, or if you want to, you can sign up to my Patreon or my YouTube memberships. We get early videos, access to members in your Discord, my Twitch friend code, unbleeped, uncensored versions of the videos when they've been bleeped and censored. You will find non-censored versions on my Patreon and YouTube memberships. Exclusive content such as long-form interviews with people I've previously had on the show. Good stuff. And more things. Stream archives when I've done those. You'll also, if you sign up, you will get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. My vassal. That's not true. You're not a vassal. I am your vassal. I am all of your vassals. I am for you, please. I am your man. I'm not woman. I'm your tran. Please, your tran. All of these people. Cat, read this part now out. I hate that this is the first one now. Fuck you. The Flying Brit, Aegis, Uncast Shadow of a Southern Myth, Aaron R., Rain, Michael McGrorty, Will, Alexander Barnes, Reesnet, Ken Sorden, Andrew Steele, Georgie, Carlito Del Mozzote, Anna Nicholson, Dungeon Slime, Naomi Gorman, Melody, Ben Norman, Brooke Linnett, Heidi Law, Transform Function, Cara Patching, Mattia98, Lilith Dawn, Spin Noir, Gilded Dragon, Slice of Cake, Rue, Buried Elk, Ewan Bennett, Mouty M, Dina Service, You're Made of Stupid, Tomo, Melissa Jackson, Rena Who's Your Stuff, Minstrel of Course, Emma, not Emma, Jeffrey On, not Tom, not quite so brave as Sir Lancelot, LFR, Truth Boy, Ariella, Procquar, Robin Thomas, Emily Eisenberg, Alex Escape, Kirby, No Sparkling Heart, Corey, Gianna J, Mike the Sword, Carolyn, Imogen Q, Luciana Freire Andrade, Adam, Harry, Endog191, Cav, Kesa, Dia, Da Tortilla, Azul, Leon, Adam Lees, Danielle Neville's, No Not That Paul, MB, Wandering Wonder, Lex Phoenix, Ender Kurzitz, Mira D, Jade Senior, Boa Ear, James W, Thorngill, Deborah Laboon, Zilla's Athenaeum, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lissette, Jay, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helen Ariel, Sierra Whiskey, Ali Catkill, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Shield Daden, Robin Podolsky, Nightlight Plushy Jesus, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Soma Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Joe McMillan, Carolyn Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, Howard Lott, Marky Love, Zach Bevan, Meow Meowski, Kamui, Eva Kebab, Marty Hunt, Robin McCallan, Jane Luciferian, Melissa Allen, Atarax Spills Things, and Sarah Francesca Smith. Thank you all so much for everything. Keep me going. Love it. Love that. Like being able to afford things and like making this. I had fun with this one. This is yeah, one of my favorite topics on earth. So I'll probably be wrong about more than half of this. Let's be honest, because and people are very passionate about that. I'll be very sad if fan channels that I watch are angry with me of this video, but this is my take. I wanted to say it. Sorry to everyone who disagrees, I guess. This is why I'm so scared doing media stuff half the time, because art is so subjective, and when I'm so passionate about something, it's really hard for me to write stuff without worrying that I'm sort of ruining the integrity of it or anything by sort of observing it makes it less great. Like some weird quantum shit. I don't know. I'm talking out my fucking ass, but this is one of the reasons I didn't make a Pluribus video, despite being obsessed, loving pure Pluribus, having so many thoughts on fucking Pluribus. I sat down to write it, and I thought, my god, if I write about any of this show, if I write anything about it, it'll sort of flatten it into one dimension and make it much less than it is. For this, I mean, I've read all these books so many fucking times, and I've been obsessed for over a decade. It's fine. It's fine. At this point, someone's got to hear my opinions on it, so it's you 35,000 people who are gonna have to hear about it. All right. Love you all. Keep sending stuff and keep help me love it. Yeah, goodbye.